Hi, welcome to our presentation. I'm Ryan Smith, and along with Michael Davis, John Jakubowski, and Francisco Hernandez, we'll be presenting on inductive discipline in the classroom. All right, so I'll just share the slides and we will get going. So, inductive discipline in the classroom, what does this mean? Well, basically, our presentation will consist of three parts. Part A, B, and C. So first, we're going to start by just kind of giving you an overview of the current landscape with discipline in Catholic schools, kind of show you some of the flaws and inefficiencies and why overall discipline systems are failing our students, particularly minority students, whom many of us teach in our under-resourced, underrepresented Catholic schools. Part B will then move to induction, which was a big topic during one of our weeks in developmental psychology, and explain what induction is, how we can work that into the classroom, and why it's more beneficial than traditional disciplinary structures. And then we'll wrap up with a more individualized, more customized part C, which kind of gives you some tips on what you can do to increase the likelihood of your discipline being effective by using inductive methods. So I'll pass it off to Mike Davis, who will kind of give you a bit of an overview on part A.
Hello, everyone. Let's move on to the first part, the importance of this topic. So today, again, we're talking about disciplinary structures in Catholic schools. And there are three main reasons why we should be researching and considering this topic of disciplinary structures. First and foremost, the research does show that students are affected by their perceptions and experiences of these school disciplinary structures where they attend. Specifically, under-resourced schools and minority students, there's a major impact on their experience of disciplinary structures. There's been a lot of research that's been put out on the school to prison pipeline, in which students of color receive more punitive, harsher punishments at school, and this increases their risks of incarceration as adults. And so this topic is not new, and as we can see that the discipline has very large impacts on students, and more so specifically in Catholic schools. The trend right now is in the Catholic school demographic is becoming more and more diverse every year. And so this topic of disciplinary structures, which are more likely to affect students of color, right? It's very significant that we look into these disciplinary structures of Catholic schools, since they will be teaching this more diverse group of students. And finally, considering Catholic schools, there's also this sort of motif of the Catholic school advantage, in that many students, many families attend Catholic schools for this expectation of moral development. And so our primary question really is, right, do these disciplinary structures at Catholic schools promote moral development in students? And again, in an institution where more development is expected in the curriculum, it's therefore necessary to consider how disciplinary structures are either promoting a positive moral development or not promoting any moral development at all. And so we can move on to the next slide. So the current state of Catholic school disciplinary structures, there's three main trends. The very first trend we can notice is that Catholic schools have a more tendency to use exclusionary punitive punishment. So when we speak of exclusionary punishment, that means using suspensions, detentions, or expulsions. These punitive measures take the student who and their behavior and remove them physically out of the classroom or out of the school. So compared to public schools, Catholic schools seem to rely on these methods more than public schools. Another trend that we notice is that Catholic schools seem to use these punitive measures for less severe behavior. So where in public schools, they would use suspensions and detentions to ensure student safety, Catholic schools will use detentions and suspensions and the threat of expulsion to to prevent bad behavior or unwanted behavior. And some of this unwanted behavior can be as simple as preventing gum chewing to public forms of affection. And so we noticed that trend that Catholic schools in general seem to use these exclusionary measures with more freedom and with less severe, behavior. And then finally, we also noticed that Catholic schools, in compared to most public schools, they have in their written policies, they have less proactive and punitive alternative measures. And so that's just saying that Catholic schools typically do not have a written plan of sort of a proactive sort of consequences for students or alternative consequences for unwanted behavior that is outside of exclusionary practices. Now, let's move on to part B, where we're going to discuss disciplinary styles and some of their benefits and negative consequences.
Thanks, Frankie. So the problem of discipline and moral development in Catholic schools can be examined on multiple levels: classes to coaches to parents to punishments. This presentation specifically addresses a central question to discipline and moral development in Catholic schools: what do teachers do when students step out of line? The inevitable misbehaviors face a variety of responses from different teachers in different contexts. Assuming the teacher addresses the misbehavior, the teacher has a few different options for disciplinary approaches. These approaches are power assertion, love withdrawal, and induction. This presentation, this slide, these next few will detail what characterizes each technique and argue that induction is most effective for instilling empathy and fostering moral development in Catholic school students. So to define these three terms, power assertion can be understood as an eye for an eye disciplinary strategy, where a student's misbehavior is met with swift and harsh punishment. This is similar to things such as detention, suspension, expulsion. Power assertion seeks to maintain a dynamic of educators as disciplinarians and students as subordinates. Next, love withdrawal can instead be understood as emotional punishment, whereby students are made to feel bad for their behavior. Love withdrawal is aimed at ensuring that students feel negative emotional weight as a consequence of their actions. It can be seen in educators telling students that they should be ashamed of themselves for their behavior. Lastly, and of greatest importance for this presentation, induction refers to attempts at communicating to the child the consequences of his or her actions for others, and involves using reasoning to develop empathy or perception of the needs of others. So in contrast to power assertion and love withdrawal, induction places a much greater emphasis on instilling empathy in students and emphasizing that students are capable of reaching a higher moral standard. Induction thus frames discipline in a more positive and forward-thinking manner that reminds and reinforces the student's potential for better behavior. So to touch on induction just a bit more before I pass it off to John, induction is shown to have many positive effects on student moral development. Inductive reasoning helps promote moral identity more than power assertion and love withdrawal. Additional research shows that inductive discipline decreases peer aggression, helping improve the culture of the school as a result. Moreover, inductive reasoning has been shown to increase academic performance and critical thinking skills. Better emotional self-regulation has also shown to be another benefit of induction. Inductive discipline also helps to develop empathy, which can increase pro-social behavior or behavior done for the good of other people. This is a focus in the research and a critical component of our argument for the benefits of inductive discipline. So before we move on, this picture here on the right points to the fact that induction promotes moral identity, the sense that it's important to be moral and that one's choices matter, which is alluded to by this distraught look on the man's face in the picture as he battles between good and evil. So I'll pass it off to John, and he will continue our discussion on induction.
Thanks, Mike. So one of Mike's critical points there at the end about the benefits of inductive reasoning was talking about how it promotes empathy. And that's just a huge bevy of literature out there about how empathy is so important for a variety of moral development outcomes. Among those is like there's been a lot of research done on how induction and inductive disciplinary techniques can develop empathy, as well as the benefits of empathy itself. So kind of first of all, inductive discipline, or induction as we've kind of been referring to it, promotes empathy, which is critical to developing a moral and caring adult. So many times when we think of somebody who's caring, we think of somebody who's empathetic, who's looking for others, who's other-centered. It's kind of hard to picture somebody who's caring who is not empathetic. So empathy is obviously pretty crucial for developing these full adults here. Induction also engenders empathy because the crucial point of inductive disciplinary techniques is to try and have kids come and to realize other people's perspectives. Research from Crevin and Gibbs, done in 1997, discusses how induction promotes empathy, which in turn, kind of what Mike Davis was talking about just before, predicts pro-social behavior, kind of these myriad of actions that society views as beneficial, like sacrificing for others, sharing, donating, and giving, and stuff like this. But kind of even more broadly, getting to the last point on the slides here, empathy is so necessary to see why an action might be right or wrong. Martin Hoffman's research is kind of foundational on induction and inductive discipline, done in kind of the 70s and 80s. And he makes his claim that empathy is critical to justice. So earlier I talked about how empathy is important in caring, but even in justice, empathy is so critical because selfishness, or egoism, as Hoffman calls it, leads to kind of breaches in justice, as you're not really looking for what's best for others, you're kind of looking what's best for yourself. And if we do that, we cannot promote this true equality that we want to take on if we can't see the perspectives of others. So empathy is so critical to do that. But with this emphasis on empathy, we can see beyond the narrow point of view that we have. We can learn to consider the world through the lens of others, which is exactly what this photo is showing here. So the more we can incorporate inductive disciplinary techniques, the more we can kind of reach towards this photo shown on the screen, this taking on the lens of others. So this is so critical to moral development, and kind of the rest of the presentation will be looking at techniques specific and just kind of general across many classroom settings for how we can carry out this research. Let me change slides here. There we go. So you can see the QR code there. That QR code links to a form, a Google form that I made to specifically use in my classroom this year. I really kind of struggled with this year because I found that a lot of times, just kind of the 5 minutes that I had between period and period, I would want to talk to kids and I would want to kind of get at this conversation of, well, what did you do wrong? Or like, why was it wrong? Or what effect might that have on others? But you're limited by 5 minutes. And as soon as those 5 minutes start, you have kids coming into the class or kids banging on the door to enter the class. So there's kind of logistical constraints to these conversations. And so I wanted to get at these kind of empathy focused disciplinary techniques, the kind of inductive disciplinary techniques. And I did that trying to kind of fill out this QR code. And we'll be talking about this a little bit more at the Q&A meeting, so you should come there. But basically the QR code, I think it has a couple of benefits. One, it has like an immediate feedback, and it forces people to kind of, you know, we're not talking about tomorrow in class where the action feels far removed. We're talking about immediately. So, okay, reflect on this immediately. And the form contains questions designed to foster metacognition, kind of what the third point says there, kind of like think about your own actions and think about your own thoughts and how are you acting? And like questions like, what did you do wrong? And what can you improve on? As well as kind of empathy-based questions trying to drive this inductive disciplinary techniques, such as what effect will your words and your actions have on others? Or what effect did your words or actions have on others? And for me personally, this kind of helps fill this logistical constraint. And also hopefully it will kind of go from me being like, hey, no, like you did something wrong, into kind of like, okay, why was it wrong? Why might that have hurt other people? And kind of trying to develop empathy in the form of inductive discipline. So this was both helped me use limited time more effectively, and also trying to foster this empathy and metacognition in my students. Other similarly creative pursuits in a variety of different classrooms are welcome. We would love to hear your ideas at the Q&A, so please come with the ideas. But for example, in religion or English classes, we could ask questions about that ask students kind of journal on a variety of prompts to develop empathy. So maybe something like what was one thing that hurt you, and how would you, how have you done anything similarly, and kind of ask to think about these other-centered questions and trying to consider the perspective of others. So while inductive disciplinary technique could really be done anywhere from elementary to high school, anywhere from math to English, we can carry this out in specific pedagogical content areas by talking about specific ways we can journal and foster empathy, because empathy is something that I think kind of comes from the creative process within, and kind of the beauty of English classes there. Yeah, so we're going to kind of go to some more general conclusions, and I'll turn it over to Ryan Smith to do that. So thank you.
Thanks, John. So to wrap up here, John just kind of gave you some more specific examples of inductive methods that you could use in your classroom management. Now I'm just going to kind of give you some general takeaways from our research that you can kind of take however you want. So if you feel like one or more of these points kind of resonate with you, feel free to take that in whatever direction you think is most effective for your city, your school, and your classroom climate. So number one is that current school disciplinary systems are just simply ineffective. Not only do they fail our teachers and admin and faculty, but they really fail the students themselves, right? At the end of the day, discipline is supposed to be in place to instill moral values and a sense of citizenship within students. And right now, the research shows that what we have in place is simply not working, which is why we wanted to do some research into what we can do better as teachers. And kind of going off of that, students should play a role in their own moral development, right? We're teaching students not just skills and content such as math and English, science, social studies. We're also teaching them how to be better citizens, how to be better stewards of their school community. And so they have to play a role. It's a necessity that they play a role in their own moral development through inductive methods that we were just kind of speaking about with John. And the reason we choose induction is because the research shows, as Mike and Frankie were saying before, that those methods are proven to stimulate moral development within children. So remember, these kids are still forming, whether it's just academically, emotionally, mentally, right? These kids are still growing in so many different ways that we don't even realize on the surface level. And so the smallest things, smallest changes that you can make to your classroom management and your discipline structures will have lasting impacts on the citizens and the people that they become once they come of age. Right? And at the end of the day, point 4 is probably the most important, and that's that your classroom is your classroom. So don't be afraid to take initiative, be brave, be courageous, right? That space is your domain to kind of operate as you please. So find what works for you and go out and make sure that you're developing kids, not just in your content area, but also as moral young adults, as Catholic schools should. Appreciate you taking the time. We hope you had some questions for us. And thanks for watching our video.